Hey, so I wanted to make just another tutorial on doing Xano and Bubble authentication. So in this case, Bubble is just acting as the front end and Xano is the back end. So it is handling all the API calls. All your user information is stored in the Xano database. So your Xano API is doing the authentication and the authenticated request. So this question has come up a couple times, so I thought I'd make another tutorial on it for you guys. So I have Bubble open here, but let me jump to Xano real quick. We're going to work with, for this tutorial, the login endpoint. We won't do the sign up endpoint. It's pretty much the same, just also takes in a name. We'll do, the first page will be this auth me, which will just basically display the user record, and then we'll do this get stuff API endpoint, which is just getting the stuff in this stuff database table by the custom query, where the reference to the user ID is equal to the authenticated user ID. So it's just getting essentially my stuff for your user. So for example here, if we go ahead and get the auth token from Michael at email.com, you can see he's got a number of stuff. We can do it for another user here. You can see he just has a couple of items there. So let's jump to Bubble real quick. And let's first jump to plugins. There's a couple plugins that we're going to use in this tutorial. First being the API connector, so we can use all those Xano API endpoints. And also this local storage, which is just a free Bubble plugin. And we're going to use this basically to store the authentication token and send it from page to page. Typically, Bubble will recommend in their documentations to send data from page to page in the form of URL parameters. Some users don't like to do that with the authentication token, so this is just another method. So let's first start with the API connector. I created a Xano API here. First we have the login endpoint from Xano, and I just grabbed the endpoint URL. If we come back to Xano and just hit this link icon, we can just grab that URL here. I paste it in here, and then I just defined the JSON object, which is just the inputs, email and password, and we use these little brackets for dynamic values. And then for the body parameters, because we're logging in, you need to put in the credentials of an actual user, and then uncheck this private, initialize the call. And just when we initialize that call, it'll come back with this auth token. Okay, next is I called this endpoint myInfo, and this is just the auth me endpoint, which gets the user record. Here we need to add a header, and because Xano uses JWE tokens, the header method for that is authorization, and then the word bearer, and then the actual authentication token. So you'll need to get a actual valid authentication token from your users, unselect private. You can very easily get that in Xano. If you just hit run and debug and hit this style, you can select a user, and then you can just copy that to your clipboard very easily and then just paste it after bearer. And when we initialize this call, you can see we'll just get my info back. And then lastly is that my stuff one. So once again, I grabbed the endpoint URL, and because this one requires authentication too, I went ahead and did the same thing for the header there. And just when we initialize that call, we can see we get that data back. So those are the three endpoints we're going to be using. One other thing I forgot to mention, the login endpoint, make sure it's a post command, and also you use as action, because we're going to want to use this action in the workflow. My info and my stuff here, you can use that as data. They're both gets. Okay, great. So let's jump to, let's first go to the design. I just created a very simple and easy login here with just a couple inputs in this login. And then what I've done here, this little guy, we actually get this from that local storage plugin. So you can see there's send storage and get storage. So on this login page, we're going to use a send storage. And you don't have to worry, this actually won't show up when we actually go and preview this. We just need this so we can access this in the workflow. So go ahead and drag just the send storage somewhere on the page. You can put it in the corner. It really shouldn't matter where it is. So if we jump to the workflow now, when that button is clicked, I'm going to hit that Xano login endpoint. The way we can do that is we open up an action, we go to plugins, and then we should see that Xano login right there. And we can go ahead and click that. And then the body and password, instead of those hard-coded values we entered in to initialize the call, you can insert dynamic data here. And you can do the input email, the value, and then the same thing with the password as value. Okay, so that's what that would look like. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that because I'm already doing that in step 1. Step 2, we're going to do that send storage A. So what I like to do, and I'll go ahead and redo this over here, if you go to element actions, you can see that we have access to that send storage. Okay, that little thing we dragged onto the page. So we can go ahead and select that. Make sure to select that element box. Ours was just defaulted, I think, to send storage A. And then here you can define a key value pair. So it's important to remember, and obviously they have a lot of options, so you can send a lot of different data. It looks like up to 15 different key value pairs. So the key is what you're going to call when you're actually getting this storage on another page. So it's important to remember that. For example, I just called it token, and then the value we would want to use in insert dynamic data here. And we can do result of step 1, that Xano login API call, and just make sure to select the auth token, which is the response. So that's what that'll look like. I'm going to delete this again because I have this right here. You can see I also called it token here, result of step 1, it's auth token. And then step 3 is we'll just go to page 1, which will have the my info, so that auth me endpoint. Okay, so let's next go to design, and we can go ahead to page 1. And page 1, I'm just displaying my name and email of the user. So I created this group here so we could have these text fields for this auth me or my info endpoint. And then we also are going to want to drag this get storage somewhere on the page. So the login screen, we use the send storage. Now we're using the get storage because we want to get the authentication token, right? So once you drag this get storage onto the page, I actually want to jump to the workflow first before we start filling this stuff out. So if we jump to the workflow, we can first do when the page is loaded, and I'll go ahead and recreate this action here because I already have it. So when the page is loaded, we'll go ahead and open up to add an action. We'll do element actions, and we'll do push values a get storage. Okay, so we're going to push values into this get local storage for this page. So when we do that, we can select what element. This is get storage A, just the default, and then we just enter in the key. So we don't do any value, it's just a text key. So remember, it's important to remember what you're naming it when you're sending storage, because this is how you're going to access it. So this is all I would do here because I called it token on the send storage. I'll go ahead and just delete that. And you can see that's exactly what I did for step 1 there. Okay, so now that we've actually gotten that auth token from our local storage, we go back to the design, this group I created here. The type of content is that my info API call, which is the auth me. The data source is that actual API call. API provider, you can see that. And then for inserting the header here, we first need to hard code in the word bearer. And then to make the actual token dynamic, what we can do here is we can open up this and we find that get storage A, and it's just the key. So remember, there's 15 different slots of keys, so remember which key number you actually put that auth token in. So mine was just the first one, which is just key, no number, and that's all you need there. And that will make the authentication header just dynamic. And then for these texts, I probably don't need to go over this, but this will just fill in the name and email dynamically. And then I have this button here that just takes us to the page of my stuff. And I'm not doing anything fancy there. I'm just navigating to a new page. So we'll go to page 2. And here I just have a repeating list of the My Stuff API endpoint. We're doing another get storage here, so make sure this is somewhere on the page. And similar how we did that with page 1, which was my info, we'll jump to the workflow. When a page is loaded, push values to get storage, and I name this one page 2. And then we just need to remember the name of that key that we want access to. And once again, it's token. So one last time, now in the design for this repeating group here, in the exact same fashion, this time I'm calling the My Stuff API endpoint, and we can see the token here is getting from storage page 2 key. So remember which key or where you put that token in all these keys, and then you'll be able to access that auth token. So let's go ahead and quickly preview this. I'll jump back to the index here. So we'll go ahead and input michael@email.com and say password 123. We'll hit login. First we'll get just my info. So we'll see just name and email, and then I'll go ahead to see my stuff. And on see my stuff, we'll see all of my items there. So let's go ahead and run it for one other user just to show you it's dynamic. So we'll go ahead and say Andy's info here. You can see his info, his name and email, and then his stuff, which are just 2 items in this case. So there you go. Once again, you'll be wanting to use these 2 plugins, API connector and local storage. Bubble's kind of go-to way is to send data in the form of the URL parameters. But if you don't want to do that, you can use this local storage to send storage, push values to get a storage. You can even clear storage or remove storage too. So if you want to log out, you would use that just to clear the token and just forget it. So hope that's helpful. Once again, this is how to do authentication and authenticated requests with Xano as the backend and the API and database, and Bubble as the front end. So if you found this video helpful, please subscribe to Xano's YouTube channel. It'll help other people find this content. And thanks for watching. See you guys in the next video.